Development Review Handbook. Step-by-step guides, tools, and resources to help navigate the development review process of Milpitas. Section 1. Introduction. Section 1 will orient you to the organization and format of the Development Review Handbook, including icons and interactive elements that will help you use the handbook effectively. Section 1 will also introduce the key concepts and types of development review you should understand before continuing to the rest of the handbook, which explains the development review process in detail. Purpose and intent. Getting a permit from the city can seem like a daunting task if you don't know where to start. The goal of this handbook is to provide you with a general understanding of the entire process of getting a permit so that you know what to expect at each step of the process. This will streamline the review process and save you time and resources. What is the development review process? The development review process is every step that applicants go through in order to receive all the planning, building, engineering, and fire permits needed to build their project. It is important to understand this process to better plan ahead, manage expectations, and do your part in getting through each step. Who should read the handbook? The handbook is intended to serve as a guide for homeowners, developers, city staff, decision makers, and our community as each play a crucial role in the process. Anyone who is interested in making changes to their property needs to understand what is expected of them throughout the process in order to avoid delays and extra costs. In this guide, you will learn how to navigate each step of the process, who the key participants are, and what city staff and decision makers are looking for while reviewing your project. Handbook Organization. 1. Introduction. Overview. Types of permits and review. Timelines and environmental review. Resources. 2. The development review process. Overview of the process. 5 process steps in detail. 3. Roles and responsibilities. 4. Policies and regulations. Introduction to planning and zoning. Planning with the environment. 5. Appendix. Checklists and project tracker. I. Introduction. This guide should be used as a starting point for understanding the development review process, which can be complex and vary significantly depending on your project. The handbook identifies key topics the applicant should understand in order to successfully move through the process. The handbook also identifies potential pitfalls, common mistakes, and complicating factors that may prolong the review process or lead to a denial of the project. Keep an eye out for the following icons to direct your attention to key aspects of the process. Helpful guides within the handbook. This icon highlights key terms on specific topics within the development review process. Sometimes an environmental review, known as California Environmental Quality Act, is required for a project. This icon indicates when to consider California Environmental Quality Act in your application. This icon points out topics that often require a discussion with planning staff, and as a reminder to ask for help. If viewing this document digitally, click on this icon to open the corresponding webpage on your web browser. If viewing a digital version of this document, click on this icon to jump to another page with more information. Types of permits and review. Types of permits. A permit is documentation from the city that you can proceed with your construction project. There are many types of permits, however there are 2 main categories. Planning and building permits. Planning permits require a nuanced review, sometimes requiring public hearings and environmental review. You first need planning approval of the project design before proceeding with building approval. Planning review, design. Focuses on design, minimizing impacts to surrounding neighborhoods, and implementing the community's vision for the city. Building permits are more straightforward with little room to deviate from the standards required by the city. Building approval ensures the project is built correctly to the city code for safety. Building review. Engineering design and construction. Ensures safe construction. Engineering permits, for example, encroachment permits for off-site improvements, and fire permits, for example, fire sprinkler and fire alarm permits, may also be required during the building review phase of the project. Types of review. Most complex projects require approval from both planning and building department reviews prior to construction. This means you will need to receive a planning permit and all permits required during the building review phase, including building, engineering, and fire permits. More details on complex projects and planning and building review are highlighted on the following pages. Planning review. Planning review involves reviewing applications to ensure the proposed project is consistent with adopted planning documents and regulations, including the Milpitas General Plan, specific plans, and the zoning ordinance for permit approvals. The main types of planning permits for complex projects include a use permit, site development permit, tentative map, and variance. Reviewing projects for consistency with planning documents and regulations ensures that the city evolves over time in a way that is in alignment with the community values and city policies. Entitlement. In permit applications and planning documents, you will often see the word entitlement. An entitlement is the approval from planning to develop your property for a desired purpose. Development approvals may be required if you are building a new building, expanding or making changes to an existing building, or changing how you use an existing property. Table 1. Planning permits for design projects. Use permit allows properties to be developed with land uses not otherwise permitted within the particular zoning district. Required for when you are changing use of the land. Site development allows for the physical improvement of a site. Required for new buildings and structures, grading, and other site improvements such as parking lot modifications, drainage and street improvements, and landscaping. Tentative map allows for the division of land to develop and potentially sell each resulting parcel individually. A tentative map shows the design and improvement of a proposed subdivision and the existing condition on and around it. Variance. Sometimes sites have special physical conditions which make application of certain zoning standards overly burdensome. In situations like this, an exception from a physical standard of development can be granted to allow minor deviations from the zoning ordinance. Building review. Building review ensure plans demonstrate that the built project will be up to code to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the City of Milpitas citizens. Minimum standards are defined by building codes, engineering standards, state law, and other city policies. Building permits relate to the construction of buildings or parts of buildings, including additions, new construction, or remodels, including upgrades to building systems, such as structural, electrical, mechanical, or plumbing projects. Engineering permits, for example, encroachment permits for off-site improvements, and fire permits, for example, fire sprinkler and fire alarm permits, may also be required during the building review phase of the project. If you are uncertain whether your project requires both planning and building review, ask a planner. Table. Building permits for construction projects. The following is a sampling of different types of building permits. This list is not complete with all types of building permits. Building. Residential bathroom remodel. Existing fireplace reconstruction. Kitchen remodel. Re-roof. Skylight installation. Swimming pool removal. Photovoltaic, solar, panel installation. Mechanical. Air conditioning, no electrical upgrade. Air conditioning and electrical upgrade. Furnace, with new or repaired gas line. Electrical. New electrical service panel. Temporary power pole. Electrical lights, switches, or receptacles, no electrical upgrades. Electrical lights, switches, or receptacles. Electrical vehicle charging system, ventilation not required. Electrical vehicle charging system, ventilation required. Photovoltaic, solar, panel installation. Plumbing. Irrigation sprinklers. Sewer line. Water heater. Water piping. Water service line. Complex projects. Complex projects are the focus of the handbook and are subject to the full development review process. Complex projects include multi-step approvals for permits through departmental reviews, environmental impact review, California Environmental Quality Act, a public hearing. Complex projects that require the development review process may include remodeling a home or a commercial space, building a new home, building a larger development, This handbook is your first step towards understanding the development review process for complex projects. The following sections of this handbook provide more information regarding the process, key players, and review criteria that apply to your project depending on your project scope. Detailed in Section 2. Follow the steps in Section 2 for a detailed overview of complex permits and the development review process. Simple projects. Simple projects are different from complex projects, as simple projects do not require an applicant to go through the full development review process. Because simple projects are smaller in scope, they can be administratively approved by city staff without a public hearing and are not subject to an environmental review. Some examples of simple projects: residential, single-story addition remodel, garage conversion remodel, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, fences and pools, re-roofing, interior renovations, commercial industrial, interior alterations modifications for office, retail, and restaurants, tenant improvement projects, demolition projects, small monument signs, hazardous waste storage. For more information on simple project permitting and review and more examples of simple projects, jump to Appendix, Building Permits, on pages 66-69 to better understand the process and how this will apply to your project, permit applications, and fees. Unsure if your project is considered a simple or complex project type and what permits are required? All questions can be answered by the planning department online or in person. How long will my project take? Permitting timelines vary based on the scale and scope of project. Timelines largely depend on how quickly the applicant resubmits, meets all local, regional, state regulations, and addresses staff's comments. It also depends on input and feedback received from citizens, advisory boards, and decision makers. Project review could involve multiple rounds of submittals and reviews, and public hearing could involve multiple hearings. The following chart shows example timelines based on the type of permit review, and is meant to illustrate relative amount of time needed to reach approval depending if your project needs an environmental review. Permitting and California Environmental Quality Act. The California Environmental Quality Act is the state's most important and comprehensive law to protect the environment. The state adopted California Environmental Quality Act in 1972. Establish a higher standard of environmental protection because it's important we take care of our clean air, water, and earth. California Environmental Quality Act requires cities to measure, document, and disclose the environmental impacts of development projects and limit or avoid those impacts when possible. California Environmental Quality Act applies to all projects that require a discretionary action, decision that requires the exercise of judgment or deliberation by a government agency and will impact the environment. Many small projects are exempt from California Environmental Quality Act. However, projects that aren't exempt require further study to determine if they will have significant impacts on the environment. A negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration can be prepared if the project will not result in significant environmental impacts. However, a full environmental impact report, EIR, is required if impacts cannot be mitigated. The California Environmental Quality Act process can significantly impact the development review process since it can take months and sometimes over a year to complete. If California Environmental Quality Act analysis is required, cities cannot approve the project without completing the California Environmental Quality Act process and certifying the required California Environmental Quality Act document. Resources. The development review process requires substantial coordination between property owners, applicants, city staff, and outside agencies. The planning staff should generally be the first point of contact in the development review process to ensure your project is consistent with the city's zoning and confirm whether a planning permit is required prior to a building permit. The Building Safety and Housing Department at the Permit Center will be your point of contact once you are ready to start your building permit process.